The moment Dmitri Volkov's hand touched the small of my back, I knew my life would never be the same. Not because of the heat that spread through my body like wildfire, or the way every woman in that ballroom turned to stare with undisguised envy. But because in his amber eyes, I saw something I'd stopped believing existed, someone who looked at me like I mattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this impossible story really began. Back to the night I sat alone at table 18, the forgotten daughter at her sister's engagement party, wearing a dress from last season and a smile that hurt my face. My name is Chloe Morrison. And this is the story of how I went from invisible to unforgettable in exactly 37 days. The night everything changed, the Peninsula Hotel's grand ballroom glittered like something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across marble floors polished to mirrors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Chicago's magnificent skyline, the city lights twinkling like scattered diamonds against the November darkness. Everywhere I looked, people in designer clothes laughed and clinked champagne glasses, celebrating my younger sister Elena's engagement to Marcus Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore Technologies fortune. And there I sat. Alone. At table 18. The family overflow table, tucked near the service entrance where waiters rushed past with trays I couldn't afford to touch. I'd arrived at 7:30, exactly on time, wearing the navy blue dress I'd bought 2 years ago for my college roommate's wedding. I'd paired it with shoes from Target and a clutch I'd borrowed from my best friend, Maya, who'd begged me not to go tonight. "They don't deserve you," she'd said, her dark eyes flashing with protective anger. "Your family treats you like you're invisible, Chloe. Why subject yourself to that again?" Because Elena asked me to come. Because despite everything, she was still my sister. Because some pathetic part of me kept hoping that maybe this time would be different. That maybe my parents would finally see me as something other than their greatest disappointment. I should have known better. The scrutiny started the moment I walked through those ornate double doors. My mother, Diane Morrison, swept past me in the receiving line, her Chanel suit probably worth more than 3 months of my rent. "Chloe, darling, you came alone?" Her voice carried that particular tone perfected by women who'd mastered the art of sounding concerned while actually being critical. "We'd hoped you might bring someone. There are several eligible young men here for Marcus's firm. You remember the Hendersons, don't you? Their son, David, just made partner." "I'm fine, Mom," I'd forced out, my smile feeling like broken glass. "I don't need you to set me up." "Of course you don't, sweetie." She'd patted my arm with the kind of touch that felt more dismissive than affectionate. "Though it would be nice if you made an effort. You're 32 now. Your biological clock isn't getting any younger, and with your situation, you can't afford to be too picky." My situation. That's how my family referred to my life. Like my career as a social worker was some kind of unfortunate medical condition rather than a choice I'd made with purpose and passion. My father, Richard Morrison, had been even more direct when he'd cornered me near the bar during cocktail hour. "Still working at that community center?" His disapproval hung in the air like expensive cologne gone rancid. "I spoke with Gerald Harrison last week. His firm is still looking for someone in their marketing department. Starting salary is $120,000. I could make a call." "I don't want to work in marketing, Dad. What you want and what you need are two different things, Chloe." He'd sipped his scotch, his eyes already drifting past me to someone more important. "Your sister understood that. Elena made smart choices. She's marrying well, building a future. Meanwhile, you're throwing away your potential on people who will never appreciate it." The people he was referring to were the kids I worked with every day at the Southside Community Youth Center. Teenagers from broken homes, kids who'd aged out of foster care, young people the system had failed. My job was to help them find housing, job training, life skills, to give them the kind of support I'd taken for granted my entire privileged life. I made $48,000 a year. I lived in a studio apartment in a neighborhood my mother refused to visit. I drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic that made concerning noises every time I turned left. And I'd never been happier or more fulfilled in my life. But try explaining that to Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Financial Group, whose definition of success began and ended with dollar signs and country club memberships. Dinner had been torture. 7 courses of food that tasted like ash in my mouth while conversations swirled around me about vacation homes and stock portfolios and the right private schools for children who didn't exist yet. The couple to my left discussed their recent trip to the Maldives. The woman across from me showed off a tennis bracelet that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. I smiled. I nodded. I wondered if anyone would notice if I simply disappeared. Then came the dancing. The DJ announced Elena and Marcus's first dance, and they floated across the floor like they'd been choreographed for a music video. My parents danced next, looking every bit the proud, successful couple. My older brother, Christopher, and his wife joined them, their 3-year-old daughter held between them, giggling with delight. Even my cousin Sarah had a date, some lawyer she'd met at a charity fundraiser who looked at her like she hung the moon. And there I sat at table 18, the only single woman over 30 in a room full of couples, trying very hard not to feel like the complete failure my family believed me to be. That's when I felt it. That prickling sensation of being watched. I looked up, and across the ballroom, I saw him. He stood near the bar, apart from the crowd but somehow commanding the entire space. Tall, at least 6 feet 4 inches, with broad shoulders that strained against his perfectly tailored black suit. His hair was dark, almost black, cut short in a style that suggested military precision. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw marked by a thin scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his temple, and eyes that even from across the room seemed to see straight through every defense I'd spent years constructing. But it wasn't his looks that made my breath catch. It was the way he was staring at me. Not with the passing curiosity of a stranger at a party, but with an intensity that felt like being studied, assessed, evaluated for some purpose I couldn't begin to understand. I looked away first, heat rising in my cheeks. When I glanced back, he was speaking with Marcus's father, Thomas Whitmore, their heads bent together in conversation that looked serious despite the celebration happening around them. Then he was moving. Cutting through the crowd with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd never been told no in his entire life. He was coming toward me. My first instinct was to run. To grab my borrowed clutch and make some excuse about checking on a non-existent emergency. But something kept me frozen in my chair at table 18 while he crossed that ballroom, his eyes never leaving mine. He stopped at my table. Up close, he was even more striking. Those eyes I'd noticed from across the room were amber, the color of good whiskey in sunlight. His cologne was subtle but expensive, something woody and masculine that made my mouth go dry. "You've been sitting alone all evening," he said. His voice was deep, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "Russian, maybe? Eastern European? That seems like a waste of a beautiful dress and an even more beautiful woman." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. This close, I could see the faint laugh lines around his eyes, the precise way his suit had been tailored to his frame, the thin gold watch on his wrist that was probably worth more than my car. "I'm Dmitri Volkov," he said, pulling out the chair beside me without asking permission. "And you are Chloe Morrison, the bride's older sister who works with disadvantaged youth and drives everyone in her family crazy by refusing to conform to their expectations." I stared at him. "How do you? I make it my business to know things." He settled into the chair with fluid grace, angling himself toward me. "Thomas Whitmore is a business associate." He mentioned his son's engagement party. He also mentioned that Marcus's future sister-in-law was, and I quote, "brilliant but misguided, wasting her Stanford education on social work." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I've always been drawn to brilliant, misguided women." That's... I struggled to find words. "That's incredibly presumptuous of you." "Yes," he agreed easily. "It is. But you haven't asked me to leave, which suggests you're at least somewhat intrigued. Or possibly just too polite to tell me to fuck off. He paused. Are you going to tell me to fuck off, Chloe Morrison? I should have. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this stranger, this intense, overwhelming, slightly terrifying stranger, was bad news wrapped in an expensive suit. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was, no. His smile was devastating. Good. Because I have a proposition for you, and I think you're going to want to hear it. What kind of proposition? Dmitri leaned closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell that intoxicating cologne, see the exact moment his pupils dilated slightly. Dance with me. Let everyone in this room see that you're not alone, not forgotten, not the family disappointment they've decided you are. His voice dropped lower. Let your ex-boyfriend, who's been watching you from the bar for the past 20 minutes with his new fiancée hanging on his arm, see that you've moved on to something far better than he ever deserved. My head snapped toward the bar. And there, exactly where Dmitri had said, stood Brandon. Brandon fucking Carter, who I'd dated for 3 years. Brandon, who I'd thought I might marry. Brandon, who'd dumped me 2 days after I'd turned down the corporate marketing job to take the position at the youth center, saying he needed someone more ambitious, more aligned with his goals. Brandon, who was now apparently engaged to Melissa Vanderbilt, whose father owned half of Chicago's downtown real estate. I don't need pity, I managed, my voice tight. I'm not offering pity. Dmitri stood, extending his hand. I'm offering a dance. One song. Let everyone here see that you're not what they think you are. That you're not alone. That you're someone a man like me would cross a ballroom to claim. His amber eyes held mine. What do you say, Chloe? Will you dance with me and let them all wonder who the hell I am and why I can't take my eyes off you? The smart answer was no. The safe answer was definitely no. I took his hand and stood. One dance. His smile widened. We'll see about that. The dance that changed everything. Dmitri led me onto the dance floor with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. His hand settled at the small of my back, warm through the thin fabric of my dress, while his other hand clasped mine with surprising gentleness for someone who looked like he could break steel with his bare hands. The DJ, as if sensing something significant, shifted to a slow, sultry song. Around us, other couples swayed, but I was barely aware of them. All I could focus on was the man holding me, the way he moved with practiced precision, and the fact that every single person at table 18, including my family, was staring at us with expressions ranging from shock to outright disbelief. You dance well, I said, needing to fill the charged silence. My mother insisted on lessons when I was young. She believed a man should know how to lead properly, even if everything else in his life was. He paused, searching for the word. Complicated. Complicated how? That's a third date conversation. His hand pressed slightly more firmly against my back, guiding me through a turn. For now, just know that I'm very good at getting what I want. And tonight, what I want is to see that pinched look fade from your beautiful face and watch your family scramble to figure out who I am and why their disappointing daughter is dancing with me like we're the only 2 people in this room. I'm not, I started to protest, but he cut me off. You are beautiful. You're also exhausted, underappreciated, and one snide comment away from either crying or committing murder. His amber eyes searched my face. I recognized the look because I've felt it myself. The weight of disappointing people who were never going to be satisfied no matter what you did. The accuracy of his observation stole my breath. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you have a master's degree from Stanford in social work. I know you turned down 3 high-paying corporate positions to work at a community center where you make a fraction of what you're worth. I know your family thinks you're wasting your life, and I know you lie awake at night sometimes wondering if they're right. He pulled me fractionally closer. Am I wrong about any of that? How do you? I told you. I make it my business to know things. The song shifted into another slow melody. Your ex-boyfriend is still watching us. So is your mother. So is practically everyone at this party who decided you weren't worth their attention tonight. They're all wondering the same thing: who is Dmitri Volkov, and why does he look at Chloe Morrison like she's the most fascinating woman he's ever met? And why do you? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Look at me like that, I mean. You don't know me. We met 20 minutes ago. Sometimes 20 minutes is all it takes to recognize something worth pursuing. His thumb traced a small circle against my back, the gesture unconscious and somehow intimate. And I've learned to trust my instincts about people. My instincts say you're extraordinary, Chloe Morrison. They say you're exactly the kind of woman who walks away from comfort because she believes in something bigger than herself. They say you're brave enough to sit in a room full of people who underestimate you and still hold your head high. He paused. They also say you're one more family disappointment away from finally telling them all to go to hell. And I'd very much like to be there when you do. The song ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. But neither of us moved. Come with me, Dmitri said quietly. Out to the terrace. Away from all these people. 5 minutes of fresh air where you don't have to pretend to be fine. I should have said no. Should have thanked him for the dance and returned to my table and my borrowed clutch and my too tight smile. Instead, I heard myself say, okay. Secrets on the terrace. The peninsula's terrace overlooked Chicago's skyline, the November wind sharp enough to cut but not quite cold enough to drive us back inside. Dmitri draped his suit jacket over my shoulders without asking, the residual heat and scent of him enveloping me like a protective barrier. We stood at the railing, the city spreading out below us in a glittering tapestry of lights and lives and stories we'd never know. Better? He asked. Much. I gripped the cold metal railing, letting the wind clear my head. Thank you. For the dance. For seeing me, I guess. Even if it was all part of some elaborate game I don't understand yet. It's not a game. Dmitri turned to face me, leaning one hip against the railing. Or if it is, we're both players. Because I have a proposal, Chloe, and I think we could help each other. Another proposition? My family is traditional. Old world Russian values combined with new world power. He pulled out a silver cigarette case, then seemed to think better of it and tucked it away. They've been pressuring me to settle down, to find a suitable wife, to produce heirs to carry on the Volkov legacy. The pressure has become problematic. And you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? I guessed, pieces clicking together. That's why you researched me. Why you knew about my family. This is all some elaborate scheme to get your relatives off your back. Our relatives, he corrected. Your family wants you to find someone successful, to prove you're not wasting your life. Mine wants me to find someone respectable, to prove I'm capable of building something beyond my business empire. We could give each other exactly what we need: space. Time. Freedom from constant judgment and disappointment. By lying to everyone we know. By giving ourselves breathing room to exist without constant criticism. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the best possible way. Think about it, Chloe. A few months of carefully orchestrated appearances. Family dinners where I play the devoted boyfriend and you play the woman who finally made a good choice. In return, you get your family off your back about your career, your life, your complete lack of interest in conforming to their expectations. And what do you get? The same thing. My family stops trying to marry me off to women who see me as a paycheck and a passport to luxury. Something darker flickered across his face. I get to choose who I spend my time with, even if it's initially based on mutual benefit rather than romance. This is insane. Probably. He smiled, and the expression transformed his severe face into something almost boyish. But the next song is starting inside, And your ex-boyfriend is watching through the window with an expression that suggests he's regretting every decision that led to him not being the one holding you right now. So what do you say, Chloe Morrison? Will you take a chance on something insane? I should have said no. Should have recognized this for the terrible idea it obviously was. But standing on that terrace, wrapped in Dmitri Volkov's jacket, watching Chicago's lights twinkle like fallen stars, I made a decision that would change absolutely everything. Yes, I whispered. But I have conditions. His smile was victorious. I wouldn't expect anything less. What happened next shocked everyone. We hammered out the details standing on that terrace while the party continued without us inside. No physical relationship unless both parties agreed. Complete transparency about family events and expectations. Either person could end the arrangement at any time, no questions asked. And most importantly, Dmitri would never, under any circumstances, interfere with my work at the youth center. I need that to be mine, I'd insisted. My family already thinks I'm wasting my life there. I won't have you trying to convince me to quit just to make our fake relationship look more believable. I wouldn't dream of it. He'd pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. In fact, I'm making a donation to your center right now. $50,000, no strings attached. Consider it a gesture of good faith. My jaw had dropped. You can't just, I can, and I did. He'd shown me the confirmation screen. The money hits your account Monday morning. Use it however you see fit. New computers for the kids. Better security. More staff. Whatever you need. That's when I'd started to realize that Dmitri Volkov wasn't just wealthy. He was operating on a completely different financial plane where $50,000 was the equivalent of me buying someone a coffee. We'd returned to the party 20 minutes after we'd left, and the difference was immediate. My mother had descended on us like a hawk spotting prey, her earlier dismissiveness replaced by intense curiosity. Chloe, darling, you didn't mention you were seeing someone. Her eyes had raked over Dmitri with undisguised assessment. Aren't you going to introduce us? Mom, this is Dmitri Volkov. Dmitri, my mother, Diane Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, a pleasure. Dmitri had taken her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that belonged to another century. You have a remarkable daughter. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have captured her attention. My mother had practically preened. Well, we've always known Chloe was special. Though she's been so focused on her career, we worried she might not make time for romance. Tell me, Mr. Volkov, what is it you do? I own several businesses throughout Chicago and New York. Import-export primarily, with some real estate holdings and investments in various sectors. The answer was smooth, practiced, revealing nothing while sounding impressive. Though my favorite investment is the time I spend with your daughter. The evening had transformed after that. Suddenly, people wanted to talk to me. My cousin Sarah had pulled me aside demanding details. Christopher had actually looked at me with something resembling respect. Even my father had approached, his earlier disapproval replaced by cautious approval. Dmitri Volkov, he'd said, shaking his head. I've heard of him. The Volkov family has significant holdings throughout the Midwest. Very old money. Very powerful. He'd studied me with new eyes. I have to admit, Chloe, I'm impressed. He seems quite taken with you. He is, I'd confirmed, the lie tasting strange on my tongue. Brandon had been less subtle. He'd cornered me near the dessert table after Dmitri had stepped away to take a business call, his fiancée Melissa conspicuously absent. Since when are you dating Dmitri Volkov? He demanded, anger barely concealed beneath forced politeness. Since it's none of your business, Brandon. You're making a mistake, Chloe. Men like that don't date women like you. They use them. They get what they want and move on. Women like me? I'd felt something cold settle in my chest. You mean women who care about things beyond stock portfolios and country club memberships? Women who actually want to make a difference in the world? I mean women who are naive enough to think they can fix broken systems and broken people. He'd stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think he actually cares about you? About your work with those kids? He sees an idealistic do-gooder he can manipulate. And when he's done, you'll be right back where you started, alone, broke, and wondering why you wasted your best years on people who will never appreciate it. Is there a problem here? Dmitri's voice had cut through the tension like a blade. He'd materialized beside me, his hand settling possessively at my waist. Because it looks like someone is bothering my girlfriend. Brandon had paled. No problem. Just catching up with an old friend. Excellent. Then you won't mind catching up somewhere else. It wasn't a question. Brandon had left. Dmitri had pulled me closer, his lips brushing my temple in a gesture that looked affectionate but allowed him to whisper, "You okay?" "Yeah," I breathed. "Thank you. Always." The first month, playing the part the arrangement started simply enough. Dmitri picked me up 4 dates that were carefully staged for maximum family exposure. Dinner at restaurants where we'd inevitably run into people my parents knew. Charity galas where his presence elevated my status from disappointing daughter to woman who'd obviously made a smart choice. Weekend brunches where he'd charm my mother and discuss business with my father while I sat beside him feeling like an imposter in my own life. But something unexpected happened in those carefully orchestrated performances. I started to like him. Not as a fake boyfriend or convenient arrangement, but as a person. Dmitri was funny in a dry, slightly dark way that caught me off guard. He was surprisingly well-read, quoting Russian literature and philosophy with the ease of someone who'd been raised on Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. He listened when I talked about my work, asking intelligent questions and offering insights that suggested he actually cared about the problems I was trying to solve. And he was good with the kids at my center. I'd brought him there 3 weeks into our arrangement, partly as a test. If he couldn't handle my work, couldn't see the value in what I did every day, then this whole thing was pointless no matter how much it pleased our families. He'd passed with flying colors. The teenagers who usually greeted new visitors with suspicion and hostility had responded to Dmitri's straightforward honesty. He didn't talk down to them or offer empty platitudes about bright futures and reaching their potential. He told them the truth, that life was hard, that the world wasn't fair, that they'd been dealt a shitty hand and nobody was coming to save them except themselves. But that doesn't mean you're alone, he'd said, standing in our cramped community room surrounded by kids who'd learned to trust no one. It means you have to be smart. You have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. You have to build your own safety net because the system sure as hell isn't going to do it for you. He'd looked at each of them in turn. And if you're lucky, you'll find people along the way who actually give a damn. People like Ms. Morrison, who could be making 6 figures somewhere comfortable but instead chose to be here with you. Don't waste that. Don't waste her belief in you. I'd fallen a little bit in love with him in that moment. Standing in my underfunded community center with its peeling paint and donated furniture, speaking to broken kids with more honesty and respect than most adults ever showed them. That night, after he'd driven me home to my studio apartment in his ridiculously expensive car, I'd hesitated before getting out. "Thank you," I'd said. "For today. For being real with them. They get enough fake concern from social workers who are just counting down to their pension. They needed someone to tell them the truth." "The truth is all I have to offer," Dmitri had replied. "Everything else is just performance." "Is this a performance?" I gestured between us. "Us?" He'd been quiet for a long moment. "It started as one. I'm not entirely sure what it is anymore." I'd kissed him then. Leaned across the console and pressed my lips to his, tasting surprise and coffee and something indefinably Dmitri. He'd frozen for half a heartbeat before kissing me back, his hand cupping my jaw with unexpected tenderness. When we'd pulled apart, both breathing hard, his amber eyes had been dark with something I couldn't quite read. "Chloe, I know," I'd whispered. "I know this complicates everything. But I'm tired of pretending with you. If we're going to do this, I want it to be real. At least between us, even if everyone else still thinks it's an arrangement." "Are you sure?" "Because once we cross this line, I'm sure." He'd kissed me again, deeper this time, full of promise and possibility and the kind of heat that made rational thought impossible. That had been 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks of a relationship that had somehow become more real than anything I'd experienced with Brandon in 3 years. 4 weeks of falling for a man who'd started as a convenient fiction and become the most genuine connection I'd ever had. 4 weeks of believing that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found someone who saw me, really saw me, and liked what he found. Then came the night everything fell apart. The truth about Dmitri Volkov: it was a Tuesday evening, exactly 37 days after that first dance. I was at my apartment, grading reports from the kids at the center, when my phone rang. Maya. My best friend, who I'd barely seen since this whole thing with Dmitri started. "Chloe, we need to talk." Her voice was tight. "Now. I'm coming over." She arrived 20 minutes later, laptop in hand and fury in her eyes. "I didn't want to do this over the phone," she said, setting her computer on my tiny kitchen table. "But you need to see this." "See what?" "The truth about your perfect boyfriend." She pulled up a series of articles, police reports, surveillance photos. "Chloe, Dmitri Volkov isn't just a businessman. He's connected to the Russian Bratva. Organized crime. His import-export business is a front for money laundering and God knows what else. The only reason he hasn't been arrested is because he's careful. Smart. Untouchable." The words didn't compute at first. I stared at the screen, at photos of Dmitri meeting with men who looked like extras from a mob movie, at articles detailing FBI investigations into Volkov family enterprises. "No," I said. "No, you don't understand. He's been investigated but never charged. These are just accusations. Chloe, wake up." Maya grabbed my shoulders. "He's a criminal. A dangerous man who's been using you for God knows what purpose. Maybe to make himself look respectable. Maybe as a cover for his activities. Maybe just because he could. He wouldn't, he would. He did." She softened slightly. "Sweetie, I know you care about him. But this man isn't who you think he is." I'd called Dmitri immediately after Maya left. Demanded he come over. Needed to hear him tell me it was all lies, misunderstandings, the kind of rumors that followed wealthy men who refused to play by conventional rules. He'd arrived within 30 minutes, taking one look at my face and understanding immediately. "You found out," he'd said quietly. "Is it true?" My voice broke. The Bratva connection. The money laundering. The investigations. Dmitri had moved to my window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. When he finally spoke, his voice was weary. "My family has interests that operate outside conventional legal structures. I've spent the past 5 years trying to legitimize those interests, to move us toward businesses that don't require FBI surveillance or questionable ethics. But yes, Chloe. I am connected to organizations that most people would call criminal." The admission had felt like a physical blow. "You lied to me." I omitted truth. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Anger replaced hurt. "You came into my life with this elaborate scheme. You researched me. You knew exactly which buttons to push to get me to agree to your arrangement. And all of it was based on lies." "Not all of it." He'd turned to face me, and in his amber eyes I'd seen genuine pain. "My feelings for you are real, Chloe. Everything between us, the way I feel when I'm with you, the person I want to be when you look at me like I matter, that's not a lie. That's the realest thing in my complicated, fucked up life." But you're a criminal. I'm a man trying to be better than his legacy. Trying to build something that doesn't require violence or fear or compromising the people I care about. He'd stepped closer. I should have told you. I wanted to tell you. But I was afraid, of what? Of this. Of you looking at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now. Like I'm a monster you made the mistake of falling for. The truth was, I didn't know what to feel. Betrayed, yes. Angry, absolutely. But underneath all that was a more complicated emotion, understanding. Because I'd seen Dmitri with those kids. I'd watched him be gentle and patient and genuine. I'd felt the way he held me like I was something precious rather than convenient. The man I'd come to know didn't match the criminal in those police reports. I need time, I'd finally said. To think. To figure out if I can reconcile who you are with who I thought you were. Take all the time you need. He'd moved toward the door, then paused. But know this, Chloe Morrison, I've never been good at following rules or making smart choices. But falling for you? That might be the smartest, dumbest thing I've ever done. He'd left. And I'd spent the next 3 days trying to figure out if loving someone meant accepting all of them, or if some truths were too big to overlook. The decision that changed everything on the 4th day, I made my choice. I called Dmitri and told him to meet me at the youth center. On my territory. In the place that mattered most to me. If we were going to have this conversation, it needed to happen where I felt strong, not vulnerable. He'd arrived at 7 p.m., after the kids had left. I was sitting in the community room, surrounded by the artwork and stories and dreams of teenagers who'd been lied to by every adult in their lives. Thank you for coming, I said. Always. He'd stayed near the door, giving me space. Have you made a decision? I have questions first. About your business. About what you're actually involved in. I need complete honesty, Dmitri. No more omissions. For the next hour, he told me everything. His family's history in Russia. How they'd immigrated to America with mob connections already in place. How his father had built an empire on fear and violence. How Dmitri had inherited that empire and spent 5 years trying to transform it into something legitimate without getting killed by people who preferred the old ways. I'm not innocent, he'd said. I've made choices that would disgust you if you knew the details. But I'm trying, Chloe. Every day, I'm trying to be better than what I was raised to be. Why me? I'd asked. Of all the women you could have approached at that party, why did you choose me? Because you looked like I felt. Trapped in a role everyone expected you to play, exhausted by the weight of disappointing people who'd never be satisfied. He'd finally moved closer. And because when I researched you, when I learned about your work and your choices and the way you'd walked away from comfort to chase purpose, I saw someone brave enough to do what I'd been trying to do, choose their own path despite everyone else's expectations. This is insane, I'd whispered. I'm a social worker from a privileged family. You're a reformed mobster trying to go legitimate. We don't make sense. The best things never do. His hand had cupped my cheek. I love you, Chloe Morrison. I didn't plan to. It wasn't part of the arrangement. But somewhere between that first dance and right now, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. And I understand if you can't accept that. If my past is too complicated, if my present is too dangerous. But I needed you to know. I'd looked into his amber eyes and seen truth. Messy, complicated, imperfect truth. But truth nonetheless. I love you too, I'd said. And I'm terrified by how much. Because loving you means accepting parts of your world I don't understand. It means trusting that you're really trying to change, really becoming the man you want to be. I am. I swear to you, I am. Then prove it. I'd stepped closer. Show me. Let me be part of your life, the real one, not the performance we've been giving our families. Let me see what you're actually building, where you're actually going. And if I can live with that reality, then we'll figure out the rest together. He'd kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. And in that moment, surrounded by the dreams of kids who'd been knocked down and gotten back up, I'd understood something fundamental. Love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, even when the fight was hard. Especially when the fight was hard. 6 months later, the truth revealed the day Elena's engagement party photos hit social media, the ones showing me dancing with Dmitri like we'd discovered fire. My mother called. "Chloe, darling, we're having a family dinner this Sunday. Your father and I insist you and Dmitri attend. We have news we'd like to share." I'd agreed, curious despite myself. My parents rarely called family meetings unless something significant was happening. Sunday arrived cold and clear, Chicago's January sky the color of steel. Dmitri and I drove to my parents' house in Lincoln Park, our hands linked across the console of his car. "Ready?" he'd asked as we pulled up to the imposing brick facade I'd grown up behind. "As I'll ever be." My entire family was there. Christopher and his wife. Elena and Marcus. Even my cousins had been summoned. We gathered in my parents' formal dining room, the one reserved for important occasions. My father stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Diane and I wanted to share some news about the Morrison Family Foundation." He paused dramatically. "We've decided to redirect our charitable giving toward causes that reflect our values. And we're starting by making a significant donation to an organization that's very close to our hearts, the Southside Community Youth Center, where Chloe works." The room went silent. I stared at him. "We're donating $500,000 over the next 5 years, my mother added, smiling. "And your father is joining their board of directors." We realized, after watching you these past months with Dmitri, after seeing how happy you are, how fulfilled, we realized we'd been wrong. About your choices. About what constitutes success. You've been making a real difference, sweetheart, and we should have recognized that years ago." Tears burned my eyes. "Mom, Dad, let us finish," my father interrupted gently. "We're also establishing the Chloe Morrison Excellence in Social Work Scholarship at Stanford. Full tuition for students committed to community service careers. Because you were right, and we were wrong. And it's past time we acknowledged that." I couldn't speak. Couldn't process. Could only feel Dimitri's hand squeezing mine under the table. After dinner, after the congratulations and the tears and my mother hugging me like she hadn't in years, Dmitri and I escaped to the back terrace. "You did this," I said. "You talked to them. Convinced them." I may have suggested that their definition of success was remarkably narrow, he admitted. And I may have mentioned that the daughter they'd been treating like a disappointment was actually the best person I'd ever met. But Chloe, they made their own choice. To finally see what I saw from that first moment at table 18, a woman worth celebrating. I kissed him then, there on my parents' terrace with Chicago's winter wind cutting through my coat. "Thank you," I whispered against his lips. "For seeing me. For choosing me. For being brave enough to love someone who didn't fit into your plans." "Plans change," he murmured. "The best ones always do." 1 year later, the happy beginning, we got married on a November evening, exactly 1 year after that first dance. Small ceremony at the youth center, because of course that's where it had to be. The kids decorated. Maya was my maid of honor. Dimitri's business partner Franco stood as his best man. My parents came. My whole family came. And they smiled, really smiled, as I married a reformed mobster who'd loved me enough to become legitimate, who'd transformed his family's empire into something clean because I'd asked him to prove he meant what he said. During our first dance, Dmitri pulled me close and whispered, "Still the best decision I ever made. Walking across that ballroom to table 18. Asking you to dance." "Second best," I corrected. The first was choosing to become the man I could love without compromise. Fair point. We swayed together while our families watched, while the kids from the center cheered, while Chicago's November stars glittered outside the windows. And I understood finally what it meant to be truly seen. To be chosen not despite your choices, but because of them. From invisible to unforgettable in exactly 37 days. From family disappointment to celebrated daughter. From woman sitting alone at table 18 to wife dancing with the man who'd crossed a ballroom because he'd seen something in me worth pursuing. Sometimes the best love stories start with a convenient lie. Sometimes they begin with a dance you almost didn't take. Sometimes they grow from two broken people deciding to build something better together. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they end with you standing in a community center surrounded by everyone who matters, wearing a simple white dress and realizing that you'd do it all again. Every mistake. Every moment of doubt. Every second of wondering if you were making the biggest error of your life. Because standing in Dmitri Volkov's arms, surrounded by proof that people could change and families could grow and love could bloom in the most unlikely places, I finally understood the truth. I hadn't been sitting alone at table 18 that night. I'd been waiting. For a man brave enough to see me. For a love real enough to transform us both. For a beginning disguised as an ending. And when he'd said, "Dance with me like you're already mine," I'd become exactly that. His. Just as he'd become mine. Two people choosing each other every single day, building something real from a foundation of pretend. The best kind of fairy tale. The one that starts with honesty about how messy and complicated and imperfect love actually is. And ends with two people saying yes anyway. Because sometimes that's all love really is, saying yes to someone despite every logical reason to say no. And trusting that together, you'll figure out the rest.